One of my weirdest formative experiences playing video games involves a clockwork automaton nearly breaking an analog stick and one of my favorite Nintendo characters, Shy Guy. Of course, I'm talking about the wind-up toy minigame from the original Mario Party. I got addicted to this simple minigame one afternoon in my youth and obsessively tried to beat my high score with each successive attempt. For those unfamiliar, all you have to do in this game is spin the analog stick in a circle. I quickly learned that the best way to do this was to palm the analog stick and rotate my entire hand in a circle rather than using my thumb, which almost certainly was not healthy for my controller, and my chapped hand didn't feel much better either. Eventually, I grew bored of this minigame and went and did something else. But that addicting feeling I had to continually trying to see that number go up just a little bit has trailed my video game habits since. Progression is a natural extension of the vast majority of games. If it isn't our character growing, then typically our skills as a player are improving instead. It isn't particularly novel to say, but great games imply or invoke growth. Whether that is the player character's ability to save worlds as an all-powerful warrior in Final Fantasy, or in the mastery of jumping and dashing while playing Celeste. This sense of progression is the primary and perhaps only draw of idle games like Cookie Clicker. Idle or incremental games give the player a sense of perpetual progression towards an endless goal. They draw from the same motivational pool that inspires us to level up our World of Warcraft character or retry that difficult Dark Souls boss one more time. But unlike these examples, there is typically no expectation of failure or even profound interaction. Instead, all other factors are distilled to create the illusion of perpetual growth with minimal player involvement. I want to explore further what makes idle games tick and compare them to a real-life counterpart, cryptocurrency mining. I am interested primarily in asking what both of them tell us about human nature. While this connection was a eureka moment for me, I was certainly late to the punch, as some have made it before, and there's even an idle game called Bitcoin Miner. But if you bear with me, I think you'll find this an illuminating video about both topics. As an aside, I tend to make videos that are purposefully uncontroversial, and my videos are almost always positive in nature. But this one has 3 critical points that some may find troublesome, so I'm going to share them at the front. Clicker games are not fun, Bitcoin mining is bad for the environment, and both are designed, whether intentionally or not, to manipulatively prey on human vulnerabilities to achieve their aims. These are my opinions, and yes, I intend to defend them, but if you don't want to be challenged by these ideas, this isn't the video for you. So it's best we start by defining our terms. What is an idle game anyway? They go by many names: idle game, incremental game, clicker game, and so on. But the basic structure is typically the same. At the start of play, there is some simple task allowed of the player, like clicking on a cookie. Each click then gives the player some sort of currency, and soon enough they are automating their ability to get that currency, which over time begets more money, which the player can manage to improve how much currency they receive per second, minute, or hour. Many of these games include a prestige or New Game Plus system to get the player to start over again. Regardless of the specifics, the incremental game is defined by the lack of the player's involvement at most moments. You can leave an idle game on in the background and it will keep accumulating more currency for you. I would put the idle game within the puzzle game lineage. The player's primary goal is to solve the puzzle of how to make as much currency as possible, as fast as possible. I'm sorry to say it, but idle games are not fun. Sure, if we take a loose definition of fun, like mildly interesting, we might consider them to be fun, but anything stricter and any attachment to the term evaporates. When I say fun, I mean it makes you smile while you're playing it, or at least makes you feel something. That could be anger at your opponent top-decking the perfect card in Hearthstone, sadness at the profound narrative of Gris, or a big grin when smashing ghosts into furniture in Luigi's Mansion. For a game to be fun, it needs to emotionally connect with me in some way. And if you've seen some of my other videos, you know that's not a difficult hurdle to cross. Still, I feel nearly nothing resembling emotional investment or joy while playing Cookie Clicker. All you do while playing is watch the numbers go up and make a decision every few minutes that makes the rate of numbers going up quicker if you're smart. But the increasing number does not really reflect on me. For the most part, I might as well be watching a YouTube video of numbers going up. That said, my mouth might be saying idle games are not fun, and you might be hearing idle games are bad. Au contraire, my friend, idle games are interesting in their own twisted little way. They are an entire genre unto themselves, and there is a surprising amount of scholarship and discourse on them. So the question becomes, if idle games aren't fun in the way I just described, why do we like playing them? Here are a few reasons. 1, we like progression. We like getting the sense of continual improvement, getting richer and making more currency per second. Incremental games are like a drip feed of that sweet feeling of personal development and growth. Not only are imaginary numbers constantly moving in a positive direction for us to enjoy, but we are slowly making decisions that make growth more robust, with numbers quickly becoming ridiculous after just a little bit of play. 2, idle games have a unique novelty to them. In Cookie Clicker, for instance, the general aesthetic of the game does a lot of the heavy lifting. Cute little grandmas baking cookies make way for cookie miners and cookie factories. As evidenced by the copious amounts of different idle games one can find online, many different ideas and themes can be grafted onto the frame of an idle game. This means that picking up a new one can feel fresh, even if the underlying systems are generally the same. 3, we like getting something for nothing. It is nice to take a break from the game and come back with more than you had when you left. It makes opening up that idle game app on your phone more rewarding, enticing you to come back. Like Dire Straits' classic song, Get Your Money for Nothing, implies, there is a strong allure to feeling like you won one over on the game or the world that you took from someone or something and gave nothing in return. Especially in our contemporary world where, as Marx's theory of alienation goes, we are alienated from the product of our own labor and in turn alienated from the results of the labor of others. Thus, when we get something for nothing, we don't feel like we stole from someone else, but that it was there for the taking and ended up in our lap. But that's the fundamental trick of the idle game. It makes us feel like we're getting something for nothing. But in reality, we are giving something for nothing, because when we play an idle game, we give up our time, effort, and attention in return for imaginary numbers that go up, in return for a passive and comfortable way to pass the time, in return for what exactly? Since they aren't my jam, I can't fully describe it. I was told many times growing up that games were a waste of time, but games have always been a gateway toward emotional experiences for me, and in that I found them incredibly valuable. As the Wind Up Shy Guy story reveals, an insufficiently developed minigame couldn't hold my attention for too long, even as an obsessive child, precisely because of the lack of an emotional tether. But idle games are sufficiently developed, particularly good at wasting time, so to speak. They excel at giving you just enough of a pull every time you interact with them to stay engaged, like a fish on a line. They are seductive, always offering you more nothing every time you log in, the longer you stay hooked. In their seduction, they remind me of a real-world corollary, Bitcoin mining. If you're unfamiliar with Bitcoin mining, here's a quick and dirty summary. In order for Bitcoins to transfer from one account to another, some computer out there needs to update the ledger. Rather than that being one single entity like a bank updating its logs, the transaction creates a problem computers around the world can guess at solutions for. If they guess correctly, they are allowed to update the ledger, which is verified by other computers as accurate. The miner who guesses correctly updates the chain and is then rewarded some Bitcoin for their troubles. Extending our metaphor a bit, each guess is like a click in Cookie Clicker, and a computer can make a lot more clicks per second than you could on your own. Since Bitcoin has some amount of transferability or real-world value, in essence, this is like making money from your computer just doing computer things, without much of your involvement. It doesn't take too much effort then to start to see the correlation between mining and idle games. In both, the user passively reaps the benefits of computerized labor over time. It is at this point that I would be remiss to not mention at least a little bit of the perspective of cryptocurrency proselytizers. For them, this new decentralized banking infrastructure is preferable to the traditional model of centralized governments or banks controlling currency. Bitcoin acolytes tend to be pretty bullish on its prospects to change the world, describing it as a revolution in the currency sector. Bitcoin proponents often take on an evangelistic tone typically reserved for extremist politics. I recommend reading The Politics of Bitcoin: Software as Right-Wing Extremism by David Golumbia to learn more about this phenomena. Still, while these more utopic understandings of cryptocurrency may abound in spaces that explain and deal in them, it's hard for me to look at crypto and buy into its ideology. Sure, Bitcoin is an alternative currency, but I tend to be of the opinion of Michel de Certeau, who argues the presence and circulation of a representation tells us nothing about what it is for users. We must first analyze its manipulation by users who are not its makers. While de Certeau is specifically talking about art in this instance, I think we can still apply this to idle games and cryptocurrency. So how do most people into Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining treat the currency? Not as a fresh way to revitalize and decentralize the global economic framework, but as a stock, an investment. A way to get in on the ground floor of something that will make them a lot of money the longer they stay with it. Common memes around Bitcoin like HODL and To the Moon don't suggest individuals primarily interested in a new way of banking, but people hoping to make a buck passively from an initial investment. Cryptocurrency mining, in this context, becomes a pretty convenient real-life example of an idle game. Both are seductive for the key reason that the user feels like they are getting something for nothing. This is true for the Bitcoin investor, who hopes to see its stock rise in the future, and the Bitcoin miner, whose computer is generating value out of thin air in invisible labor that is mostly out of their control. A cryptocurrency's position as an alternate currency fulfills the idle game's requirements that it gives you something novel in return for the investment of your time. And as long as Bitcoin's value rises, or your computer occasionally generates some coin for you, the process gives you the same feeling of progression and continual improvement familiar in the idle game. The thing is, Bitcoin's value does not always go up. So the key difference between the idle game and Bitcoin is that the latter can implode. The perpetually increasing numbers can go down. While I'm not here to give you investment advice, the correlation ends here, because this is the difference between playing poker on your computer for imaginary money and playing it at the casino for real-world cash. The addiction to the game becomes more potent, more real, the higher the stakes are for the player. And maybe this would all be fine and dandy. I wouldn't care too much about a group of enthusiasts and investors having fun with their own cash on their own dime, maybe making some money in the process, even if it is essentially gambling. But just like idle games waste time, cryptocurrencies waste electricity. You see, it takes a lot of computing power to make Bitcoin's decentralized system work. It takes just about the same amount of energy to mine $1 of Bitcoin as $1 of rare metals, and in some cases, more. It takes 17 megajoules of computer power to generate $1 of Bitcoin, but only 5 to get $1 of gold and 7 to get $1 of platinum. The Cambridge Bitcoin Electricity Consumption Index estimates that Bitcoin mining consumes about 0.5% of the world's electricity. That's a lot of energy, even if it is currently just a small percentage of the world's total use. As Bitcoin's stock rises and crypto becomes more prevalent in our lives, which, while not a sure thing, is a real possibility for our future, that amount of energy is expected to go up. I'm not going to tell you that Bitcoin is going to destroy our planet we're doing that without it. But as a large consumer of electricity, consuming as much as Sweden does, it certainly isn't helping the situation, and could actively harm it as time goes on and it takes up a bigger portion of the energy pie. For me, that's worrisome because, at least as it stands, Bitcoin isn't solving any real problem. We use gasoline to get from point A to point B. When we download digital games using electricity, we play them. When a plane travels across the ocean, it brings people closer together. They may harm the environment in their own unique ways, but they return something of value. Yet, like an idle game, crypto is a game of numbers perpetually going up, and as it stands, not much more. People are making money off it, but they give nothing of value back. I'm not saying that this can never change, but crypto comes with a cost. It's just transparent, hard to see, like the cost of an idle game. It is not free money. It appeals to the allure of getting something for nothing, but we need to be wise enough to know that in this world, that never really happens, and start looking for what the cost is, especially when it seems like none exist.